expend it over a year, would essentially be a half-time job.
Right.
Sometimes if they do it 6 months, it's a full-time job. I've seen them spread over 18 months, 24 months. All depends on the need of the organization that hosts them. And what's happening is the fellows are capacity builders. These are people who have had successful careers, and they have expertise in typically a whole range of not so much direct service delivery. It's like they're not necessarily delivering health care to a person who needs it. They're helping a healthcare organization improve its processes and procedures and strategies for serving a particular community. So these are people who have expertise in project management, marketing, human resource management, strategic planning, leadership, and IT, and so forth. And they bring that expertise into a nonprofit to help them improve their performance. That's the basic model of how a fellowship works and what a fellow does. So in Portland, the Social Venture Partners chapter or affiliate hosts the Encore Fellows program. That's why I'm part of SVP, and there are other affiliates of SVP around the country that also host Fellows programs. But in other parts of the country, the Fellows program might be hosted by a United Way, or in Phoenix, there's an organization called Experience Matters, and they host it in Phoenix. In Los Angeles, which is just starting a Fellows program, I believe it's a freestanding organization, and I can't recall in Cleveland, which is just starting. I mean, it's like it could be freestanding, it could be part of another organization that hosts it.
Wow.
I'm a matchmaker, basically. Those of us who run the programs are matchmakers. We're trying to match.
So, how does one become an Encore Fellow? Do they apply? Are they recruited? Do they get trained? You know, how does somebody come forward and become a fellow?
Well, the answer is sort of yes to all of that. I spend time recruiting, looking for people who want to be fellows, but one of the best models is probably iconic example, especially in our market in the Portland area, where Intel Corporation has a large footprint with 15,000, 16,000 employees. Intel is probably one of the largest national sponsors of fellows. So it's actually, in effect, a fringe benefit of working at Intel. If you work at Intel and are eligible, which means, for example, you've worked there at least 15 years and reach age 55, that kind of a policy, you're eligible for Intel to sponsor you. And
I see.
They will pay the stipend, they will pay the fees, and it's a fringe benefit of working there. Hewlett-Packard, well, nationally, Intel sponsored over 200 fellows last year because they have big footprints in several other states like New Mexico and Arizona, as well as in Oregon. Hewlett-Packard is another sponsor. There are a number of national organizations that will sponsor and advertise the program to their employees so their employees know about it as they retire. They're directed through the national office to the affiliate to them. So that's one major way. We're always looking for businesses who realize the benefits to their companies of providing their employees this opportunity to essentially become ambassadors for the company as they retire and transition into this sort of social purpose work in the community. At the same time, I get emails and calls on a weekly basis as the program has grown. People hear about it, and they don't necessarily come as a sponsored fellow. Company for which they may have left, or maybe they come out of government or wherever, isn't sponsoring them. But they say, I really have always wanted to do this kind of thing, and can I be a fellow? And the answer is potentially yes, but then we have to find a source of funding. It could be a foundation. It could be that the nonprofit itself funds the fellowship. they agree to pay the stipend and a fee
Mm-hmm.
support the financing of it. So the
Mm-hmm.
fellows come through employers, and they come independently through our efforts simply to recruit more fellows who have the skills that the nonprofits in our community need.
So I think this is great. What kind of training do they get?
Well, we put them through a professional development program that's really designed to help people who come out of business understand sort of some of the contextual differences about working in a nonprofit. Often you've got people coming out of what are large corporations, whether they're, Intel is extraordinarily large, but insurance companies, hospital systems, you name it, they're used to working in very big organizations. Most of the nonprofits, certainly in the Portland metro area, tend to be considerably smaller. They have to adapt to a different culture, different way of doing things. The motivations of people who work in nonprofits can be different. Things happen at a different pace. Fellows are, in effect, fellows are like limited term engagements, this 1,000-hour thing, and they're kind of like change agents. They're brought in to do projects, but they're working with other people in the organization, and if the fellow should choose not to stay on in some capacity at the end of the fellowship, well, we want them to leave something that's measurable and sustainable that will continue on with the organization. So we provide monthly, I guess you call them onboarding programs, where we address these different challenges that a fellow might face, so that hopefully at the end of that, if it's a year fellowship, that individual feels comfortable that they could continue on working in the nonprofit area, if not for the organization that hosted them initially, for another organization in the community.
Very good. That's fantastic.
We also expect the organizations that host them to explain to us how they're going to essentially train or onboard these folks into their organizations. So there's a lot of vetting and preparation that goes into creating a match between a fellow and that's the value of that the program provides, is a lot of upfront investment in trying to ensure a good and a successful match between the nonprofit.
Wow, yes.
Yes.
So how many fellows are there who are, active?
Let's see, right now in the Portland area we have, I think the last count was 34. Since the program began about 4 years ago, we've placed actually, as of the match I made yesterday, probably 60 in total. And nationally, I think the last figure I heard was, I think we've reached the 500th fellow nationally.
Wow.
And, I have, for example, probably 25, 26 applicants for fellowships, and I probably have a portfolio of close to 25 or 26 nonprofit organizations of all sorts doing work in not just early childhood education, but a whole raft of different organizational areas who would be happy to host fellows. But I don't necessarily have the funding for all of those, and I don't necessarily have a mix, the right mix of the skill set among the fellows portfolio and what the work hosts need. But that's my job, is to find those matches.
Right. So you're doing an assessment then of what the nonprofit organization needs and matching it to you said you're a matchmaker, you're matching it to the skills of the candidate fellow.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's exactly right. If we do our work well, we have a fellow who has a set of skills and a certain passion for working in that sector of the nonprofit or social purpose work. And we have a work host who has the capacity to absorb someone who is likely 50 or 60 years old and has a depth of experience and expertise. They have the capacity to absorb that person into their organization. They have a type of project that person has the skills to address, and that person has the flexibility to adapt in that environment and is a quick learner, and that's a good match when the work host is big enough to absorb them and mature enough to absorb them, has a well-defined project which we sort of flesh out before the fellowship begins.
Yeah.
The fellow can make that contribution.
Right. So, do you kind of have a profile of who really makes a successful fellow? I mean, do fellows? Well, you've only been there for 4 years, the organization, but I mean, does someone take on a project and do it for a year and then apply for another project, or apply for an extension, or and do you have a profile of who are your most successful fellows?
Well, what we look for in a fellow is there's a couple of ways of answering that. But what we look for in a fellow is certainly someone who has a reasonably well-defined skill set, functional expertise that we can match with a work host who can articulate the need for that. And so you're looking for someone with a fairly well-defined skill set. You're looking for someone who also is not just looking for a little income stream.
Right.
You're looking for someone who actually has some commitment to social purpose work, that they understand that the Fellows Program is about helping people make this transition from business into social purpose work. So they may have previously done some volunteer work, or they've just committed themselves to their careers and now they really want to give back in a way. You're looking for that, and you're looking for a degree of adaptability and readiness to adjust to whatever this nonprofit environment is. So you do need a degree of flexibility in these folks. But those are very broad criteria for what would make for a successful fellow. 95% of my job is making a match. 5% might be marriage counseling, so to speak. I mean, the success rate of fellows is very, very high. But every so often, people are people, organizations are organizations. You sort of step in and help sometimes.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Of course. So as I say, does a fellow, they work for a year.
Yeah.
Do they say, oh, gosh, Steve, that was the most fulfilling thing I've done. There's another project I could be doing with this nonprofit.
Right.
Can I re-up? I mean, is that happening? Are people continuing on?
That's an excellent question, and it's an area that the Fellows Program technically is about this transition. Now, at the end of that transition, I may be able to advise a fellow on where to seek other opportunities. The first thing I want to do is say, have you talked to your work host about whether you could stay on either as an employee, part-time, full-time, volunteering, doing contract work for them, and a number of fellows will do that. I mean, that's the first thing we advise them to do, and a number of the nonprofits have budgets or are able to accommodate these folks. Some have hired the fellows into full-time positions. Not all of them want to take full-time positions at this point in their lives, but some do. Some have been hired part-time, some have been on contract. There are other organizations in the community, whether it's the Impact Entrepreneurs Program at Portland State or the SAGE or different kinds of organizations that also help basically baby boomers move into and get connected with other kinds of work, and I'll direct some there. What we want in the program, I mean, a success in this program, and maybe that's an important thing to articulate. I think of what's a successful fellowship, and I sort of have 4 metrics. One is that the fellow feels that he or she has had a significant impact helping an organization and the people that are served by that organization. 2 is that the work host feels that they've gotten a tremendous value and contribution from the fellow in terms of the improvement in processes and procedures and capacity of that organization. Then ideally, 3rd, you'd like successful fellowship, doesn't always happen, is the fellow stays on in some capacity in the social sector. Some have decided, well, this was good, but